There it is. Well, thanks, Cara. Gosh, I think this is what the third time we've done this event with you as a sponsor. And we've worked with probably over half a dozen of people as a direct result of the presentation. Everything from a simple 1-hour consultation to answer questions, all the way to full project management and full book launches. So we're super excited to be invited back and to talk with you all today. As Cara mentioned, my name is Richard Wolf, and together with my wife, Victoria, we run Wolf Design and Marketing. And we work solely with authors. We call ourselves kind of the soup to nuts author guidance all the way through the publishing journey. So no matter what you're doing, from website design to marketing to cover design, interior, and everything in between, we help you guys with those. We've been in business since 2019, and we've worked with over 600 authors to date. Cara, if you could go to the next slide for me.
Mhm.
Perfect. So what I'd like to do is just kind of give you guys a quick 2-minute tips and tricks and give you an introduction on what we do to help authors. So today I want to talk about the difference between aggregators and retailers. And these are the key to selling and distributing your book. And the relationship can be very complex, not only between you and these sites, but also between the sites and how they interact with each other. And sorry, the aggregators, you'll hear that term often as you're researching around, are sites that distribute your work out to the retailer platforms. And distributors or retail platforms are exactly that. That's where your end reader, your target market, ends up purchasing your book. Prior wisdom was always, hey, you know what? Get your book on as many platforms as possible, because that's where you're going to get the most sales, right? But what we found during the publishing process is that really the best way to go? So this really busy chart here on the left shows the top 7 aggregators that are out there, or places to put your book files so that they can get it to the retailers. And now my point is not to go through this entire slide. My only point of showing this slide and all the complexity of the slide is that every single one of these platforms pay you different royalties. They distribute to different platforms. They all accept different file formats, and they have various print, trim, and binding options, and they're all different. So how the heck do you know which one to pick? And a bigger question to ask is, how do these work together? A decision you may make on one platform may cut you out completely out of another platform. And these are questions that you just don't know the answer to. So one of the best things you can do is reach out to somebody like us, self-publishing consultants, and talk to us about your goals and your objectives, and we can help you decide which one of these platforms could be best for you and which combination of platforms could be best for you. So some of the questions that you need to be asking is, do these retailers or do these aggregators hit the retailers I want to hit? What about margins for the retailers? You'll see some of these sites will claim you get 100% royalties. Well, yeah, you get 100% royalties until you put your book on another platform, and then that platform has to make a profit as well. They often don't talk about those things. Are these platforms user-friendly? Do you get your sales results? And most of all, what's their customer service like? If you're already an author and you're on the Ingram Spark platform, chances of you ever talking to an Ingram Spark customer service representative are almost zero. There just don't seem to be out there. So we can help you answer all of these types of questions. But the number one question you need to be aware of, whether you're writing your book, getting ready to launch your book, or your book's already there, is who is your target reader, and where and how do they shop? So what platforms are they on? Those are the questions you need to ask yourself, and those are the questions that we can answer for you. Cara, could you go to the very last slide? So an initial free consultation is a consultation is always free with us. We're happy to talk to you about your situation and give you guidance on how we can help you go forward from there. So you can use Calendly, go to our website, any of these links to set up a free consultation with us, and we'd be happy to talk to you no matter what area or what part of the journey of the publishing journey you're in. We would love to have a conversation with you. And once again, thanks again, Cara. We're happy to be here.
Thank you, Rich. I appreciate you. go ahead and stop here so I can see you all. All right, so we're going to jump right in with our first author. Dr. Rachel is our first author of today. So I just want to give you the floor to share your journey and your book and all the good things. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me. This is so wonderful. Thank you for all the resources too. Welcome, everyone. I'm Rachel. So nice to meet you. I have my book right here, Perspective. So just a quick little spiel about my book. Ultimately, we all see the world differently. And our reality is oftentimes absolute reality for us, but it's not actually absolute reality for everyone. So the book steps into trying to understand the way that different people see the world and kind of challenges us to challenge our assumptions. It's broken into 3 sections. The first section is really trying to understand the origins of our perspective, where we come to be. There's a lot of psychological underpinnings, developmental understandings, just how our brains are formed. We ultimately learn about the world based on how other people tell us the world is, and that becomes our reality. The second section goes more into reflecting inward for us to see how we see ourselves, others, and the world. There are some psychological components, philosophical components interwoven throughout, and helps us challenge some of the things that we think about ourselves and others. And then the third section is all about rebuilding the foundation is what I like to phrase it as. And it's understanding more about societal influence and how we interact with one another and how we relate to one another or don't, given the more societal components. So that's kind of my quick rundown. But I will just say it was an absolute joy to write. And I think that something that was so important for me and for anyone who wants to write a book is to make sure it's a passion project for you, something that is going to take a lot of time and a lot of energy, and just something that I think is so important for it to be truly meaningful for you, which I know is kind of like, I don't know, maybe a no-brainer to say. And I think sometimes there is this pull for us to be or do certain things in a certain way because we see other people are doing that, or that's the next step, or whatever. We have these shoulds that we kind of sprinkle around our lives. Really making sure you're delving into something that you really feel connected to and is meaningful for you. And I don't know if this is going to come up, but it takes a lot to make money off of your writing, right? It's absolutely possible. There are absolute avenues, right? Even the resources that were just so kindly expressed. It's absolutely possible. And, it's hard to make money as an author. So just really making sure that you are pouring yourself into something that is so meaningful for you. And for me, at least, I'll just say that was the primary focus, is to get my words out there. With it being philosophical and psychological, like, I just want my words to live on past me. And so I'm glad that this is out there for that. So it's kind of just my little advice, my unsolicited advice for everyone listening. But yes, if you want to learn more, I'll show you again. It's Perspective: Contemplating the Complexities of Our Realities. And it is sold on Amazon at this time. Thank you.
So I put it in the chat for folks who want to check out your book. Any questions from our audience for Dr. Rachel on her book? Things you're burning questions, things you want to know. We've got a little bit of time.
In the meantime, I'm happy to share something to give people time to write and think, so we don't have blank space. I can always share more. I love to touch base on the cover art. So it was something people judge a book by its cover. They just do. I'm just going to be honest, right? How many times do we go into a bookstore or, sift through a bunch of different books, and like, it sounds good, but maybe it doesn't look too exciting. And I think that sometimes, and I'm not knocking anyone, that's not my intention. I think sometimes self-published books, the aesthetics aren't fully there. So I think it's important to make sure you're investing time into, if somebody such as Wolf is able to support, then I don't know if that's part of what you offer, is helping with, helping with design. Definitely would be worth investing in that. I will say this particular artist was somebody I randomly stumbled upon, an Italian artist. Somebody that I knew on Facebook had shared somebody else's art, and I just was so intrigued by the art that I just followed them. This was before I was even interested in writing the book. I just was interested in their art. And when I was thinking about cover artists, I had kept seeing their art in my news feed, and I thought, you know what? I'm just going to reach out to them. The answer is always no unless you ask. And if you ask and the answer is no, you are right where you are. You have lost nothing. Someone once said, well, my pride, okay, maybe a little bit, but if we don't put ourselves out there and we don't just try things out, then we're never going to know, right? So just go for it. I reached out to their agent thinking like, who am I, this random person reaching out to this person in a whole other country? And I said, I'm interested in, seeing if this artist would be interested in creating cover art for my book. And sure enough, they were interested in just learning more about it. I sent them a paragraph snippet of what the book was about. They sent back four different cover arts, 3 or 4, I can't recall now. And I picked this one. I had a vision where I wanted there to be a reflection. They have a lot of like faces in things. I don't know the best way to articulate that, but they came up with this and they sent 3 different colors. So it just happened, not fully organically, but somewhat organically. I just was interested and sought it out. So, yeah, it was an investment. I definitely spent quite a bit on it, but I wanted to make sure that my book cover really aligned and drew people in. Aligned not only with the book, but aligned with me as well, I should say. So I will say that. Also, I want to say Fiverr is a really helpful website that I tend to use. I'm not sponsored by them, but just want to throw out Fiverr, Fiverr. There's a ton of different graphic designers who offer very reasonably priced packages or artwork, and they usually will offer several different recreations of what you're looking for. The title and my name actually were created by someone on Fiverr, and they also helped with the back. So one person did my art, and then somebody else did the binding. Is that the right word for this? I think so.
The spine. Mm-hmm.
Spine. Yes, the spine. Holds it
And
all
someone-
together.
Yeah, and someone put in the chat that Fiverr sometimes runs coupons. So that was something that was called out in the chat for folks that are interested. But I agree with you. Like the cover is, as authors, we want to be proud of the cover because that's what we push and market and have people's faces next to. So I love that you shared that. That's awesome. We have time for one question for Dr. Rachel. Any other questions for her as we're talking?
Is this your first book?
It is. I will say I've written quite a few chapters for scholarly texts and was interested in writing a scholarly type book, but then this just came to me. And yeah, so the short answer is yes, this is my first book, but I have other professional writing.
I feel like I'm called to ask, do you have other books in you that are going to come out after this now that you've taken the dive?
I love that question specifically because I think it's our default for what's the next, what's the next, what's the next. And anytime I do something, I've opened a new practice or I wrote this book. Oh, when's going to be the next book? When's going to be the next practice? I'm like, let's just revel in the moment. Let's enjoy this for a second. But I love that questioning because I think that definitely hits at like, what are we hungry for and what are our long-term goals and just where is that energy right now? So I just want to say I really appreciate that specific question. I am in the process of working on a workbook with someone for a credentialing application, a very specific niche thing, because I'm noticing part of my work in play therapy, there's a lot of overwhelm with navigating the credentialing application. So one of my colleagues and I are going to be working on a workbook for that. So yes, which is so interesting, though I don't think of it as the same type of book, but it still is a book nonetheless. So yes. Aside from that, I'm just going to let the wind take me where it takes me. And the energy is just, I'm going to ride it, the little wave when it comes. This was popcorn thoughts. My little friend, Colonel, my little popcorn thought friend likes to sit beside me and I just kind of feed it and it feeds me. So there will definitely be more popcorn popping around, but for now, I don't really have that focus of energy for another book like this yet.
Yes, power of the word yet. Thank you so much for being here and kicking off our authors. I
Thank you.
am doing raffles of the authors we're featuring today for raffle prizes, in this case, a copy of the book. So I just want to call out the winner of Dr. Rachel's book because I'm doing a random number generator. And Kathy Wilson, you're the winner of Rachel's book. So I'll make sure to connect you both by email after this event. And now we're going to move to Asia as our second author. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. I am Asia Evans. I am a financial therapist, and I wrote Feel Good Finance, Untangle Your Relationship with Money for a Better Mental, Emotional, and Financial Well-Being. I will say that I so rarely say the full title, so I do have to read it. Feel Good Finance is definitely ingrained in my brain. So my book really is about money and emotions and our mental health and understanding where does it all come from, understanding why do we do the things that we do with money, where does that come from? And the book really does take you on a journey. I would say that it's mostly for clients, but as therapists know, we aren't always the best at dealing with our money and talking about our money in general. So the book really can apply to anyone because I just personally don't think that we talk about money enough. So the journey is really starting off at the historical context. What does it mean? Like, where did this financial system come from? Obviously, it's written by a Black woman, and women in general and Black women definitely were not at the forefront of how we designed our financial system. And that's really important when we start thinking about how do generations pass down their ideas and beliefs about money. And that leads us into the psychology around human behavior and how important modeling and representation are in community and how that shows up in our everyday life with our money feelings. And then it's a nice quirky exploration of some of the client wins and challenges that I've experienced, as well as myself. There's a lot of me in the book and just kind of going through my own journey of understanding money and my feelings about money and why was I doing certain things and why were my clients doing certain things. And it gives a good amount of reflection for readers. So there may be some tears. I would definitely suggest getting a notebook and a pen or paper to jot down your thoughts, but also have a box of tissues because a lot of times we don't think about how emotional money is and what comes up with it. So yeah, that is Feel Good Finance for the most part. I would say for me, the author journey has been a journey. Like, I feel like there's no other way to put it. So I want to just reflect that I wouldn't even call myself a writer when I started this process. I was not identifying as a writer. I always kept a diary. I always liked to journal. I would, dabble with poems, be like, oh, that's crap, or oh, here's a short story, or that's not good. I would have never called myself a writer. And through this process, I eventually was able to start calling myself a writer. And now I'm working on calling myself an author. Like, I wrote 50,000 words and I'm still struggling to feel okay calling myself an author, which magically I'm like, December 3rd, when it's out in the world, I'm an author. So the journey really, for me, it wasn't about writing. I loved writing. It was probably the best thing that I have done for myself to really give myself the space to explore that part of myself and to say, oh, I'm a writer and I mean this, and I'm so excited about this subject matter. And I have a lot to say, and there's more to say. So writing to me was great. I loved it. I was in coffee shops all over New York City, like, this is the dream. I'm doing it. Very exciting for me. I hate editing. I cannot stress that enough. I didn't realize that about myself until I started the process of editing. A lot of people are like, oh, Asia, how long did it take you to write the book? This is crazy. I had no idea. I gave myself a 6-month deadline, which is absurd. And I have 2 small kids and I'm still working my full-time job, my business, and I wrote a book in 6 months. But editing was not what I was prepared for with the time. So that was a huge lesson learned about myself and about the process. And that it is still a journey. I really don't like editing anything, honestly, as I think about it. I'm like, I don't want to edit my words. I don't really want to edit my social media posts. I just don't love editing. It's not my jam, but writing felt really, really amazing. So what I will say too, in terms of like tips for the audience, I would have, if you asked Asia 3 years ago, hey, do you think that you're going to get a traditional book deal and write a book in 6 months and have that published and be out there talking about it? I would be like, who is that? That's a joke. And I want to mirror what Rachel said in that you have to try. This was something that I realized I was really passionate about, and I just wanted to try. I am the queen of, hey, try it. If it doesn't work out, that's okay. And at least you learn something either about the project or yourself, and then you can move on. So I told myself I will shop the book out to 20 publishers, agents, anybody in the book world, and 20 people will give me an idea of if this is even possible. So it was very much so a Hail Mary of like, what am I doing here? And I talked to 3 people. I talked to 2 agents and I talked to the publisher, Ben Bella, who ended up publishing my book. And that came out of like, hey, I kind of want to write a book. And I hired a book coach to help me create a proposal, which was very, very helpful for me to get me through the whole process, because my publisher, although lovely, were not hands-on with writing the book. Like it very much was myself having to push myself through this. So when people say writing a book is like birthing a baby, I can't believe I said this on a podcast, but I told the host, I was like, the thing about writing a book is that you can stop. Like I've had 2 children. When you're birthing, there's no stopping. Like there's only one end, and you have no choice. Like you must literally push through and get to the end of it. Writing a book, it's just something that you want so desperately, but you can just stop. You can just put it down. And sometimes it's really hard to pick it back up when you don't want to do that. So just remember, it's going to be difficult. It's okay. It's part of the journey. You'll learn more about yourself than you anticipated just by pushing yourself to do something that you felt like you always wanted to do. And then what I will say about tips for the audience, and this, some of the best information I got was let writing interrupt your life. I will say this until I'm blue in the face. Do not think that you will just remember it if a thought comes to you in the middle of the night or when you're grocery shopping or doing something else. Write it down, write it somewhere you'll go back to, because you will not remember, because those thoughts are going to keep coming. And then what I will specifically say about therapists is that niche down. I didn't want to. I had no desire. I was like, this is silly. Why do they make us do this? I want to see everybody. I can help everyone. But at the end of the day, I was able to write this book because I was so passionate about the subject matter, and me niching down into something I cared about, into something I was so passionate about, made it felt like it blew up my career. And I felt like I'm like living a second stage of being a therapist. So you don't have to niche down right away. You can do it on your time. But once you do, you may find that there's a book in you that you want to give to the world and give to yourself, because you have so much to say about it.
Amazing. Well, you've got lots of people in the chat saying, well, one person said they love the cover of your book. Someone else was asking you to expand on how you balance everything. So I think that resonates with this audience. So how do you have a business and find time to write a book? So I don't know if you want to answer that question for us.
Yeah, I sure will. I will also give a note about cover art. It's so important. I'm glad you brought that up, Rachel. I hated the first cover, and I felt like I'm working with a traditional publisher. This is going to be great. They're going to have the best graphic designer. Absolutely not. Nope. They were lovely and worked with the vision, but I just felt like they had a hard time getting there. And this is the second iteration. Like we had other covers. And I was really particular about a hand, because hands can look a little funky, but they did a great job, and I do love this cover. So cover art, very, very important that your vision is in it as well. And how do I balance it all? I ask this question to almost everybody that I know who has multiple things going on, especially working for yourself. So I changed my schedule around. I pushed all of my clients to Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. I left Thursday, Friday open. And usually I was writing on Thursday. And if clients canceled or I had a big gap, I was writing. I did not love the write for 20 minutes if you can, hour. I really don't like that. I'd rather sit down for 2 hours at least and continue pushing through. But sometimes you just have to find the time. So I, yeah, squished my schedule, wrote when my kids were at daycare. Sometimes I was waking up early. Sometimes I was going to sleep very late. And just making sure that I was writing as much as I could. I'm also a very goal-oriented person. I'm a Virgo, I'm pretty type A. So knowing that I had a deadline that I didn't want to miss really helped push me um, to nail it, honestly. And it was a little touch and go because I did not allow enough time for my perfectionist tendencies to edit, which was a good thing in the end, even though it felt really hard at the time.
Very much so. So you have a couple more questions in the chat. I'm going to invite you to answer those in the chat if you're open to that, Asia, just so we can move to our next author. But I also want to announce the winner of a copy of your book, Asia. So actually, the person who asked the question, Rachel Duncan, is the winner of your book, Random Number Generator. Woo!
I will say though, I've already pre-ordered it. So if you want to go to the next person, that's okay, because Asia and I are buddies. So I'd be happy to gift that to anybody else. Could I? Oh, maybe I could choose.
You want to choose just based on who's here? Yeah.
They
I was
do.
just doing Random Number Generator, but yeah, go for it.
Okay. Let's see. Casey, I'm feeling you. You want Asia's book? Okay. Yay.
Rachel's going to give that to you. Awesome. Well, I will connect Casey and Asia after. Thank you so much. And we're going to move to Kelly as our third author of the event. Thank you.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. And I'm excited to be here with one of my co-authors of The Grief Experience, Tools for Acceptance, Resilience, and Connection. And then Rebecca Johnson is chapter 21, which she'll be talking in a few minutes. But this is a collaborative book. So there is 25 authors in it, which is a little different than the other books that we talked about today. And which made it feel much more manageable to me, because I'm not sure I have it in me to write a whole book. That's what I've always wanted to do, but this gave me a way to be able to still become an author, even though I'm still struggling with calling myself that. But what started me was I'd really always wanted to write a grief book, because I'm really picky about grief and loss. It's my specialty. It's why I became a social worker. My mom died when I was 14. And so I read grief books and I pick them apart. I'm like, oh, I like this part. I don't like this part. And I really wanted to be able to write a book that I felt really could impact anybody who's grieving, not just one type of loss. And so a few years ago, I was invited to actually collaborate in Holistic Mental Health Volume 1. And in it, I wrote about my mom's death. And that was published through Brave Healer Productions. And so afterwards, I was like, oh, I really want to do a grief book, but I was scared. And to be completely honest, I met with the publisher a few times and I was like, no, I can't do this. And I let her email sit in my email box for a while, because I was like, I just don't know if I could do it, because I had to find 24 authors to sign up to say yes, that they wanted to be a part of that. So that felt really overwhelming. So I finally went for it. And I'm so grateful I did. I took probably about a year to say that I was going to start looking for everybody and get everybody on board before we actually started the whole process, because I really wanted to make sure that I found the right fit. I remember on Thanksgiving morning driving to my husband's grandfather's house and writing down all the different types of grief that I wanted in my book. And I feel like I did a pretty good job. We're pretty close. We didn't get everything, but I think we probably could have 3 more books on grief that would maybe cover them all, of the different types of grief. And I really truly believe that whoever picks up this book can relate to at least one of the authors in it, because of the different types of grief. We have traumatic grief. We have pet loss. I wrote about pet loss in mine. And a lot of my chapter was written like probably 3 days after my pup died. And so I used a lot of that when I started writing my chapter. We have anticipatory grief. We have disenfranchised grief. We have grief due to suicide. We have divorce. We have somebody who writes about coming from Poland and the grief that she experienced as being an immigrant, something that we don't talk enough about. We have infant loss. So there's really a wide spectrum of grief experiences, which I'm really so proud of. And I have to be honest, one of the things working with Brave Healer, I didn't get to read all of the chapters ahead of time. It was like formatted and sent to me. And I was like, oh my gosh, like I sat there on a Saturday morning, like, oh my God, what did everybody else write about? Like, I have no idea what's in this book. And I just sat there and cried all morning long because it was so amazing and beautiful. And I'm so proud of all of the authors that were a part of it and that were vulnerable. So each chapter is set up that they share their vulnerable story about a loss experience, and then they share a tool to help the reader. So not only are you going to be able to relate to the authors and their story, but you're also walking away with 25 tools to be able to help yourself on your own grief experience. And I'm just really, I can't be more proud of what we've created. What I think it is truly what Rachel was talking about. This is my legacy. I don't have children, and I feel like this is like my baby that I'm so proud of. And I've thought about like, I want to do a teen version of it. And then I'm like, wait a minute, I just need to enjoy this book for a while and let it soak in and get it out there in the world, because I feel like it's something that so many people can benefit from. And that's really what I wanted it to be. I wanted it to be something that's going to help people that are grieving. And so that's the grief
Beautiful.
experience.
That's amazing. So in the chat, there's a question about how you stayed organized. I know your book is different and you had multiple authors, but anything you want to say about how you organized your thoughts and move forward?
Well, so like I said, I wrote a lot of my chapter right after my pup PJ died suddenly. And then the Brave Healer Productions has a pretty good like system, the way she does things, and it's pretty fast actually. Laura has published over 75 best-selling Amazon books since 2020. And you have a kickoff call and your chapter is due 3 weeks later. So there is not a lot of time to really play with it too much. You've got to get it out to her. And then obviously the editing process starts, which is a little longer. But for me, I was lucky. I just had to do the introduction, the first chapter, and the final chapter. So that was pretty easy to knock out in a short amount of time. But I wanted to also, one of the things that I think made our book a little different is I really wanted to create a community with the authors. And so we did a lot of Zoom calls, checking in, because some of the stuff, being vulnerable and sharing your story as therapists, what we don't always do, right? And knowing that our clients can pick up our books and read about our personal stories can feel a little vulnerable and anxious. And as Laura from Brave Healer says, she calls it post-traumatic stress publication, because you have this freak out moment that like, oh my gosh, my words are out there for everybody to read, and what, like, so, but we did a lot of extra Zoom calls. I brought a breathwork teacher in to do a virtual call with all of us just to make sure that we were processing it. I think I formed some really good relationships with the authors. I only knew some of them. I knew probably about half of them. And then I had to find the rest. And so I put stuff out on LinkedIn and social media, and I just started interviewing people and meeting with them and making sure that they were in alignment with me, that they had similar grief views and weren't using outdated things. I really wanted the book to have grief-informed language. There were certain things that I really wanted to make sure were in the book that aligned with my beliefs.
You're getting a lot of relatability here in the chat. I don't know if you can see this, Kelly, but we were like, oh, yep, we've all felt that vulnerability, something about a major vulnerability hangover.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and I know you started to answer this by saying you asked people to join you in writing this. And so anything you would add of like recruiting people who are like-minded, any other tips you would have for people who are doing a joint book together?
Well, I think it's just, I had a set of questions that I had them kind of fill out before we even set up a Zoom call. And I think that kind of helped also me choose like who to really want to be able to talk about and talk about different things. And you also have to find, we pooled our money together to be able to pay the publisher for all the fees and everything. So that was probably the hardest part for me, to be completely honest. I probably need to read the Feel Good Finance book. I was like, oh, because I felt like I had to be a salesperson and explain to them why they were having to pay for this. And unfortunately, there were some people that were pretty kind of harsh about it with me, and weren't the nicest. But so, as therapists, we're not salespeople. And so being able to explain to them why we're having to pay a publisher and what's involved and all of that, that I think for me was probably the hardest part.
Thank you, Kelly. We're moving into our next author. So I want to announce who's winning Kelly's book again with my little number generator, and Erica. Erica is the winner of Kelly's book. Yay! So I will connect you both by email after today's event. Thank you, Kelly, for being here. Moving to Rebecca. Rebecca is next. Hopefully you're with me here.
Hi, I'm
There you
Rebecca
are.
Johnson, and I am a therapist, and I'm just kind of extending on from what Kelly said. I just brought her in, and they wanted me to talk to. And so I am one of the authors. My chapter is chapter 21, and traumatic grief. You are not alone, a journey of healing through feeling. And so I guess I can just speak to my journey of kind of how I accepted this. And I am like others, I am not a writer, but I've never wanted to be a writer, and I've never questioned it. It just wasn't in my scope. I'm not a big fan of it that. Um however, after COVID, I left a job of like 15 years. And I remember a mentor of mine saying, you're going to have starts and stops. You're going to have just different things come up that you're going to cling on to, or you're going to say, that's not for me. And because I just left with COVID, I didn't have a plan. I left to be with my kids, young kids during that time. And she was right. I mean, there was things that came up that I could have leaned into, and it just didn't feel right. But I joined a bunch of Facebook groups that I just was interested in, and just to feel connected, especially during that time. So I went into private practice at home during COVID, so feeling very lonely. And yeah, I just somehow saw Kelly's post and thought about it and leaned into it, and I just started asking questions. I set up a call with her, and I was really resistant that, I felt a little weird about the writing piece, but the sharing the story and sharing, trying to be helpful to others, that's what drove me to this. And so I talked with her, and I was like, I don't know what I have to offer. Like, I don't know. And so we just kind of talked it through. And then I signed up. And I'm really disappointed to hear about the money thing. Because I mean, there was so much that Kelly had to organize and had to do. And I guess I was shocked, but I wasn't, if that makes sense. I mean, I've never written a book, so I, was just learning about it, but I'm sad to hear that it was, feeling, bad words said about it. But it was, you made it, easy in my perspective. And she was always available, always answering questions. And I think the biggest thing for me was I'm a procrastinator, and so I joined a book like a writers group on Facebook. And we did calls, like I think I did like 3 months worth, and that really helped me. Um, I started this in probably January of 2022, and then we wrote it in October. So for me, it was like really a personal process of just going through just the grief process again, kind of, and walking through it, writing stuff down. I just had a little notepad on my phone, and as different things came up, I would write it down. Um, and then I signed up for the writers group, and then we had the deadlines. And so that was really helpful for me.
Looks like there's a reflection here in the chat for you, Rebecca, and all the authors on the call today. Shared theme of resources that feel good to us and align with our needs to reach our goals. I have a natural question for you of like, how do you feel now that you have gone through the writing authorship journey? I know a lot of people have an author identity, but I'm curious where you land with that.
I mean, I have a hard time saying I'm an author, and you know, I had my daughter get on me the other day. She's like, you don't, or it was a few months ago, you don't promote it, you don't do anything about it. She kind of called me out. But you know, it's still not real to me, but I try to just challenge that and just participate in these things like that, because my ultimate goal is to help share information, and I can't get the word out there if I don't do things like that. So that's where I sit on. But I don't, you know, other people told me like I did a good job writing, and they were surprised by it and how good of a writer was. You know, and that's great. I'm glad that that was helpful. But you know, I don't know. I still don't consider myself a writer. But
Well, everyone has their process, so we're glad you can
But I
share
think,
the other side of that. Go ahead, Rebecca.
oh, and I just think the tools was looking at the tools is a really neat part. My tool was a butterfly hug from EMDR treatment, and the book just holds a lot of different tools that journaling, mind body connection, dance, running. They have a running group. So it was really neat to just learn all the different things that people do during their own journey. And it can work with all different types of grief. So it's not just because mine was traumatic grief and you have to do this. You know, any of those could work during that time.
Sounds like an amazing resource. Other questions for Rebecca? We're talking about her journey. You can put them in the chat or unmute. Lots of food for thought here.
I think one thing, if I can add,
Please.
that was big for me on the editing, to kind of jump on the editing part, is one thing that Kelly recommended or gave me feedback on was that you're going to get recommendations, you're going to get things that people say to do. And I actually kept this in mind while I was writing, but you don't have to do it. And people, you know, they want more. They wanted you to do more. They wanted you to talk more, use quotes. And as I wrote it, like I thought about that, and I'm like, this is an area I'm okay with talking more about. And then this is an area that I'm just not going to go there. And thinking about that and processing that was a journey for me, but it was great advice, and I appreciated that.
I'm hearing boundaries to stay where you want to stay, feeling called to write what you want to write, not letting people influence what you want to write. Is that right? That was a lot of rights. Sorry.
Yeah.
Asia's put something in the chat here. Make sure your voice comes through. Absolutely. Any final thoughts, Rebecca, as we think about your journey?
I think just for me, it just was one step at a time. When a book just seems so big, and just even one chapter for me seems so big, but if you take it one step at a time, like it just, you get there. And so just continuing to ground yourself when you feel overwhelmed by the bigness of it.
Interesting reflection from Rachel in the chat about Tom Petty not listening to his own music, to like not let it be altered or questioned. That's kind of a theme here. Thank you so much, Rebecca, for sharing your story of like, hey, this was not something I really thought I was going to do, and it ended up being really meaningful. So for a second copy of the book on Rebecca's End with the raffle, congratulations to Drina. Drina, who's here with us today, is our raffle winner when it comes to Rebecca's presentation on her journey. Thank you, Rebecca, and thank you, Drina. Last but not least, in our author lineup is Shane to talk about his journey. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. Shane Hodges. I am a counselor therapist, licensed LPC. Been doing that for about 15 years, and I just wrote my first book. It's Time to Be You: How to Become Your Most Authentic Self. I describe it as a interactive deep dive into your own authenticity. And it is a workbook. It's a lot of fill-in aspects that challenge the reader to really dig in on who they are. I broke it down into 3 sections. The first is, how did I get here? Where did I come from? The second and biggest chunk is, who am I now? And really goes into just about any area of a person's life and personhood that I could think of. And then the last part is, all right, now where do I want to go from here? Writing the book, I'd thought about it for 5 years or so before I finally decided on which book to write. And that came about because of my own journey with authenticity. Basically hitting a point where I realized I don't want to be inauthentic anymore, ever, to any extent, because I'd done it too much in my life. So having this be my first book, I don't like going into something and not knowing how to do things. So one of my own challenges was reaching out to others for support and help. So I did a lot of that. Some of you are actually in this room or in this chat. And I've learned a lot. There's a lot of different ways to do things, and I definitely would do a few things differently if and when I do another book. But looking into aspects of publishing and the cover art and the editing, I am ADD, but also have some OCD tendencies, and I'm a perfectionist. And so editing was something I really had to kind of step back and reel it in from time to time. One of the things that I think helped me through the process was I had a life coach I was working with, and she was able to, I think it was Rebecca who said, ground yourself. Because my ADD mind would start going down to a place that didn't need to be thought of right now. But I was thinking, 5, 10, 35 steps ahead instead of let's focus on what needs to be done now. So that helped. Kara was an amazing resource. Kathy, who's also in the room, was a great resource in figuring out aspects of the publishing piece. I agree with pretty much everyone else's comment of you have to be passionate about whatever it is you're writing. And I learned a lot about myself going through this book. Asia, you mentioned, the aspect of money. Money has always been an area that I've needed to work on myself, and I've done a lot of work the last few years, so I will be looking for your book. And it's interesting to me that I also had a bit of a plan in place that was about 18 months, and the actual writing of the book I ended up doing in about 6 months. And thinking back on that, it just seems crazy to me now. But ultimately, things have gone pretty well. Cover art, I agree. I have mixed feelings on the cover art at this point. I wanted something that popped. Because I love books, bookstores, libraries, but it's like you're scanning and then something grabs your attention. And so I wanted something that pops. My favorite color is purple, and so that's how that came about. But basically, I do think it's something that is good to consider who can help you with the cover art. I don't know about the rest of you. I'm not an artist. And so I had to determine which parts of this process am I going to have somebody else help me with. So Rich, I will likely also be reaching out to you moving forward. In terms of tips for the group, one is know when you need to ask for help, or hire or pay someone else to do certain things. And what took me a long time to figure out is just because I can do it doesn't mean I have to be the one to do it. So that was a big one for me. Two, be honest with yourself about why you're doing it, and challenge yourself to lean into that vulnerability. My book is a workbook, but also incorporates my own stories, both personal and professional experiences, and then aspects of therapeutic tools. And I had several moments throughout writing the book where I wasn't sure how much to share. And I didn't want to give away all of my therapeutic tools, but I wanted to be able to help people, and give them that initial skill or ability to start the process of digging in on whatever work they're doing. And with my own personal stories, when I first decided to write a book, I wasn't sure if I was going to do this type of book, my own personal story, or a more self-help therapeutic specific book. And in the end, it ended up being a little bit of all of it. But one of the reasons I chose not to write my own story yet is because I don't think it's done, but also I wasn't ready to put certain things out there. And hopefully one day I will. But those, I would say, are the things that I would say to everybody. Ultimately, the reason I did the book is, again, in big part because of my own journey with authenticity, and spending far too much of my life believing or feeling as though I couldn't be fully myself. I turned 48 this year, and it was only within the last 3-ish years where I was finally able to get to the point where I'm like, I'm not doing this anymore. I am not minimizing, toning it down, faking it, holding back. It makes me feel icky and gross. And so I'm not going to do it anymore. And I want to, hopefully through this book, help other people recognize sooner than I did that they can do the same. So.
An inspiration. Thank you. Questions for Shane? Questions about the process? Asia, go ahead.
I don't have a question, but I just wanted to say about the vulnerability. Like, I am a pretty self-disclosing person. It's pretty much all out there at all times for anybody. But I found that even when I was just self-disclosing, like in the book and sharing about myself or my story, those were the moments that I continuously went back to afterwards to be like, how's that? How could that land? Was that okay? Was that too much? Like, those were the parts that I really felt like I had to return back to over and over again to make sure that I felt really comfortable in any iteration of how somebody would take that information, good or bad. So
Yes,
it's hard.
agreed.
You do it.
And it's, yeah, what was interesting, one of the things that was interesting to me as I came across those personal stories was, who else am I mentioning? Or who else is related to this story? And are they going to read this, and how might they interpret it? Because I know we all, recall things from our own perspective. So that was one of the thoughts that often came up.
I think the other piece you spoke to, Shane, that I wanted to call out for our audience is there's something healing and cathartic about writing a book that has our personal story in it when we're ready. I wonder if you can speak a little more to that, of that catharsis / now it's out there component.
Yeah, it's one of the things where once I started writing the book, it was, I knew I wanted to do this. Like, okay, yep. And it took me a minute to really get the writing part rolling. I knew what I wanted to write, I knew what I wanted to do, but it took me several months to really start. And then once I did, like I said, I whipped it out in very little time. But I did want to share my story because one comment that I hold very dear was a friend of mine once told me, he said, your superpower is you allow yourself to be who you are, and that makes others comfortable to be themselves. And I was like, okay, I like that. That's probably the best compliment I've ever received, because being authentic is, especially at this point, so important to me. And so it was about wanting to put myself out there. And I like I said, I learned a lot through the process. And it's funny, from the moment I submitted for the final edits to the, time frame in which it actually published, I already thought of like, oh, I forgot about this, or I need to revise this, or next time I'll do this. And it's funny that that happened just in a matter of, it was weeks.
Also very relatable once it's out there. Like, oh, absolutely. I want to thank everyone who's been present for this event. I'm also excited to see how this lands for folks that are watching the recording after the fact. Thank you to our 5 featured authors for this event. I have all intentions to keep this going because I know it is creating community and celebrating authorship. So I'm thinking of you, Rebecca, and a couple of people are like, I'm still trying to figure out how I feel about my author identity. This is a big deal. So thank you all so much for joining me today. The winner of Shane's book is Asia. So Asia and Shane connecting. Yay. So exciting. And thank you to our authors for allowing us to raffle a copy of your books to help get those out there. So I will have a recording to you all available within hours after this, because you know me, type A. But I am Kara, your host. Thank you, Rich and Wolf, as our publishing, our sponsor. And I will see you for future events. Thank you all for being here.